Hey hikers, Lee from Trailside Fitness. Today I'm going to walk you through my adventure assessment. So before I build a program for any one of my clients, I have them go through my adventure assessment. And we're looking at a bunch of different tests, if you want to call them that, just to see where clients are at physically. And then from that, it helps inform which exercises are going to be most appropriate to start them out with. And then also highlight any areas of the program I want to focus on specifically. So for example, if you did 25 calf raises on the right side and only 15 on the left, I want to clear up that discrepancy as best I can. First up in the adventure assessment is the step test. I like this 3-minute step test to give me a good resting heart rate, working heart rate, and then recovery heart rate. And this will inform me what types of cardio I might want to include into my program or clients. Next up, we've got the squat test. This really, I'm just looking for overall strength and endurance in the leg muscles, the core. So with this one, you'll see me squatting down to a ball. I just like that because it makes sure that I get nice, consistent repetitions. But this is a really good test just to see kind of where you fit overall in terms of strength and endurance for the legs. The single leg bridge test is great for testing glute and hamstring strength. It's one of my favorites. This one here, we're looking to see if we're balanced right to left side. And we'll take a look at the results here in just a moment and see how I stacked up. So the single leg sit to stand, this is probably the most challenging of the tests that I have my clients go through. It takes a lot of coordination, strength, and stability. It's one that I actually struggle with quite a bit. So I found this one to be quite challenging, more so on my right leg than my left leg. So with that, we'll move on to the next one. Any good assessment needs to include some sort of planking. So in here, we've got just the traditional forward elbow plank. And then I've also got a side plank here that you're gonna see as well. We're gonna check the right and left side. And I don't know why, but planks always seem to take forever, so I'm there with you. Single leg calf raise is next. So this one, just kind of like it sounds, doing a single leg heel raise on the right and left leg, comparing those scores to give us a good baseline. And then we'll also compare that with the single leg dorsiflexion, and there's a ratio there that I like to look for, and I'll point that out in the assessment sheet as well. So next up, we've got single leg dorsiflexion, or basically just kind of picking your foot up like you're taking it off of a gas pedal. This one I like a lot for that shin muscle. Lets me know what kind of strength and endurance we've got in there. And this is more of an endurance type muscle anyways, but hikers use it continuously every step we take. So it's nice to see if we've got the capacity in that muscle to handle a nice long distance hike. So the dorsiflexion ankle range of motion test is really challenging for me. I've got pretty tight ankles. So in this test, you put a tape measure on the ground, you're gonna glide your hips toward the wall and then measure from the end of your foot to the wall. That's gonna give you a rough measurement, and that's going to correlate to a range of motion degree for the ankle. So here we'll see that mine are pretty tight both sides, which I knew going in. So I'll be curious to see how much we can improve this over the course of the program. Okay, with the adventure assessment complete, I've got all my numbers loaded up into my adventure assessment spreadsheet. So with this spreadsheet, I've got a list of, or a baseline value that I like to have clients at least be at before their adventure starts. There's a lot of wiggle room in here, but these numbers are essentially based off of my experience working with hikers, my time in physical therapy, and understanding strength standards for different muscle groups. There's a lot of variability and opinions on how this might look. This is just a system that I use, and it works pretty well for me, and it's working great for my clients. So if they're at the desired number, that's great. We can continue to still build upon strength and endurance to get them even further down the road. If they're not quite there, that's also fine. It gives us something to shoot toward. In the end, these assessments are not pass or fail, and really they're designed just to give us a point of reference, and then from that we can track our progress as the program moves through the different stages. All right, first one up, we've got the 3-minute step test. So this test I like a lot because it does help to determine whether or not we need to put a lot of emphasis and focus on the zone 2 or the cardiovascular endurance that we need as hikers to perform well on the trail. So here I'm looking for about 85 beats per minute. This is an average I use for all clients, so it kind of is the good mix of age and sex that's going to create the variability in this test alone. There are different targets to aim for depending on your specific sex and age. This is just a good mix of the two. So here I scored 62 beats was my resting heart rate. Immediately after the test, I had 113 beats, and then a minute later, 68. So this tells me that I've got great cardiovascular endurance. This isn't an area that I really need to focus on, particularly in my program, but I also want to make sure that I'm maintaining my engine as the program progresses. So squats, what I'm looking for here is really just good strength and endurance. How many repetitions can you manage with good form before that burn kicks in, before you're unable to perform good quality repetitions. For me and my clients, if we hit a certain number in some of these assessments, there's no reason to continue. And for me, I hit that number, which is 100. At that point, I know I've got good strength, I've got good endurance, and at that point it becomes a little more subjective. How do I feel after the exercise? So the next day, are my legs sore? Are my legs sore 2 days later? How quick did I recover from that exercise, even though I've got the capacity to do that? For me, it was, this is 2 days later after I did the assessment. I had no soreness, no issues there. I've been doing CrossFit for a long time and I've got pretty good strength and endurance. So for me, I know this isn't an area that I need to put a lot of focus in, but again, I want to make sure to maintain the capacity that I've got. Single leg bridge is great for assessing hamstring and glute strength. So in this particular test, we're gonna do a single leg glute raise. So on the left, I had 21, on the right, I had 23. Now for the single leg bridge, 25 repetitions per side is what I like to aim for. And honestly, I didn't do quite as well here as I thought I might do. I did notice that my hamstrings were starting to cramp up and tire quicker than my glutes, and I didn't really feel the contraction as much in my glutes. So for me in my program, I want to make sure and emphasize good glute strength and make sure that I'm focusing on glute contraction over hamstring when I'm doing an exercise like the single leg bridge. Single leg sit to stand is probably the hardest assessment that I have my clients do. It's basically a single leg pistol or a pistol. We're just going to go down to a bench. So in this particular exercise, my workout bench is 18 inches. This is going to provide a good challenge for me because it keeps my hips level with my knees. This one's going to focus on eccentric quad control, so lowering down so you don't just plop down to the chair. And then good glute and hamstring strength to stand back up. It's also going to challenge dorsiflexion in the ankle a little bit. So this is a really good test. Here I scored 11 on the left and 13 on the right side. This, for me, I knew I wouldn't do super well in because I have limited dorsiflexion, and I just struggle a lot with good glute engagement, especially in an exercise like this. I think any good assessment should include some planks. This one, just a standard forward plank here. So I went for 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Ideally, if someone's going to be doing a long distance hike, I like around 3 minutes, but I think if they're in that 2 to 3 minute range, that's pretty good. Some clients can get away with a little bit less here. It really depends on the trip duration and maybe what the goals are, pack weight, that kind of stuff. But I think if you're in that like 90 seconds to 3 minute range, you're in a pretty good spot. Side plank. This one was a little more challenging than I thought it would be. I got 40 seconds on each side. Side plank isn't something that I would typically do in a regular workout session. I do train obliques in different ways, maybe carries, for example, but nothing so specific as a side plank. So this score, I'm gonna see if I can bump up. Here, I don't know, 45 to 90 seconds is kind of a good mark to aim for. And I think through the course of my program, I'm gonna be able to bump this up a little bit closer, hopefully to around that 60 to 90 second mark. Now, single leg plantar flexion, I did pretty well, 27 per side. 25 is the mark I like to aim for, focusing on good full range of motion and control. At that point, my calves were burning. Didn't feel like I could really get much further. So once the quality of repetitions drops, that's when I ended the assessment. So this is an area I want to make sure to improve upon as well. I think having good, strong calf strength is vital. There's multiple calf muscles I want to make sure I'm covering in any program. So I'm going to do some specific work to target the Achilles as well as the Achilles tendon, as well as the calf muscles themselves. With the single leg dorsiflexion, I'm testing the tibialis anterior, that big shin muscle that you've got. And I mentioned in the assessment portion that there's a ratio I like to look for between dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. And what I tend to see through all the clients I've ran through this assessment, it's typically a 3-to-2 or a 3-to-1 ratio. And I'm kind of right at that 3-to-1 ratio. So 60 plus, I could have done more, I think, on the single leg dorsiflexion. Typically when clients hit 60, I just have them end the assessment there. The plantar flexion is close to 30, so we'll just call that 30. So a 3-to-1 ratio. So I'm in the window there. And now for ankle dorsiflexion. This test was not good for me. I know my ankles are pretty tight, and I think if I had warmed them up and done some mobility stuff, I probably could have improved them. I just wanted to do this test cold and see where things came out. I was about 2 inches on each side, maybe a little more, give or take, but 2 inches I think is a good mark. Well, it's actually a terrible mark. So what we do know is that the distance you measure, so for me 2 inches equates to a specific degree, which is about 18 degrees of ankle dorsiflexion. Now, there has been some research that came out that says, hey, if your dorsiflexion is less than 36, there's a 5 times greater risk of sprained ankles. I don't have a history of sprained ankles, but I do know that my dorsiflexion range of motion is improved, my movement efficiency improves, and then also clearly I can reduce my risk of ankle sprains. So I want to make sure and do some work here. An ideal ankle dorsiflexion would be 4 to 4.5 inches, so maybe like 40 degrees of plantar flexion. So I'm about half of where I would need to be. I don't know if realistically I can get myself there, but I'm going to see if I can move the needle on dorsiflexion through my program as well. So now that I've got all this information, what do I do with it? Well, if you're curious to learn how I use this information to build programs for my clients and how I'm going to build a program for myself, comment down below, let me know, and I'll put together my training program. I'll walk you through the steps on what that looks like, what I've included based off of my specific adventure assessment results, and we'll go from there. Thanks so much, guys. Happy trails.